Hi there. Good afternoon. My name is Jeannie Breedy. I want to welcome everyone to a Winsor and Newton watercolor class. Today we are going to be painting a floral rooster. I have Mandy Peltier as our artist, and today she's going to focus on color mixing, specifically how to create black, shortcut the black, lots of gradient washes as well. It's a very lovely, intricate floral design and a rooster motif. So we're going to just jump right in. And I want everybody to enjoy and realize it's being recorded. So I'm just going to take it away with Mandy. And why don't we just jump right in?
Sounds good. Thank you, Jeannie. And hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm really excited to be back with another class. This is an ambitious project for a 1-hour class, so I'm just going to go ahead and share my other camera and we will get started. I like to start all of my classes by kind of going over the supply list. So this is the project we're going to be working on today, a beautiful floral rooster that I think is sort of folk art inspired. I lived in Poland for 3 years, so it kind of gave me an affinity for folk art. And we're going to be working 8 by 10 in size. So you should have a piece of watercolor paper cut to 8 by 10. And we're going to use 3 watercolor brushes, a 0, a 2, and a 4 round brush. Also, make sure you have a graphite pencil and an eraser so we can transfer the line drawing to our 8 by 10 sheet of watercolor paper. And an artist palette. We are going to mix 10 colors today. So like I said, this is ambitious. And so it is important, or I hope that you have an artist palette that has individual wells so that we can mix 10 different colors. And then I'm using the Cotman Sketchers Pocket Box set. And today's class, we're actually going to be pulling color directly from individual cakes or pans in the set as well. And then, of course, a cup of water. And I like to use paper towels when I work with watercolor. So with that in mind, I'm going to set everything aside except for what I need to sketch the line drawing. So I'm going to pull down my graphite pencil, my eraser, and I think it's going to be easier for us to draw this rooster if I pull in the actual line drawing versus looking at the finished rooster. If you do not feel super confident at sketching or drawing, what I would encourage you to do right now is take a printout of the line drawing, hold it up to a well-lit window, take your 8 by 10 sheet of paper and tape it over your line drawing, and the light from the sun will shine through the window. You'll be able to see the line drawing beneath your piece of watercolor paper, and then you can just trace over what you see. Because if you've taken some of my other classes, I usually, if I can, if what we're drawing is suited for it, I will kind of tell you to use a ruler and place a dot at this part of the ruler, at this part of the ruler. But today we are going to draw what we see. There's not going to be any like specific measurements. So with that in mind, where I'm going to start is with the rooster's eye. And his eye has, sort of a football shape for the actual eye itself. And then it sort of has a circle that goes around his eye. We're going to start with the football shape itself. So that's sort of upper left of the paper. So I kind of do this with my pencil to kind of gauge where it is. And then I'll do the same thing on my actual working paper, where I just I got a feel for where it is, and then I placed a little dot. And then I'm going to draw a small football to serve as his eye. So it's literally just an eye shape or a football shape. And then around the eye, I'm going to draw that circle that I see on the line drawing. Just get it as best you can. The circle is a little bit larger on the right side and on the bottom of the football. I'm going to call it a football so you guys can better visualize what I'm talking about here. I just kind of draw a circle around his eye. And then the part that is above his eye, this is called a comb, and it sort of looks like a comb, really, or even like a mountain peak or mountain peaks. So I'm going to start at the middle part of the top of the circle that I drew around the eye, and I'm going to draw just sort of a curved line up, and this is going to be my far right peak, and then I'm going to draw a line down, so it sort of just looks like the top of a triangle, and then I'm going to continue across, and I'm going to make more of those little mountain peaks, and they're going to get smaller as I get to the left, and it doesn't have to look exactly what's in your line drawing. I'm just drawing little peaks to serve as his comb. And then this part here that kind of hangs from his face, that's called his waddle. And so I'm now going to draw the waddle starting from the far left of his comb by drawing a line down, going just to the left of his eye, and then drawing a curved line back up. And I kind of drew my waddle a little big. I might fix that in a minute, but just draw his little waddle. And then after his waddle, we can draw his beak, which is directly left to his eye. And I'm going to go ahead and fix his waddle here and just make it a little bit smaller. It doesn't have to be, but I'll be happier if I make it a little bit smaller. And then on his waddle, just below the circle we drew around the football, there's a little circle. And I have that marked off because we're going to be painting that in with black. And so I just went ahead and marked that off in the outline so I know where to place the black color. So just draw a little circle underneath his eye on the waddle. And then there's also this curved line that connects the middle of his waddle to the bottom right of that circle we drew around the football. So I'm going to draw that in now. And I hope you guys are doing great. Again, if I'm moving super fast for you, I deeply apologize. An hour is it goes really fast, so I'm trying to utilize every second. The good news about these classes are they're recorded and they'll be uploaded to the Michael Store YouTube channel within 48 hours. So you can always watch again and pause as needed to keep up. And there's also written directions you can kind of follow along with. But now I'm going to go ahead and draw his backside and also his neck and chest. I'll start with his backside. So the top of his head and his backside. So the top of his head kind of starts on the comb and it just sort of curves down. It's not a very long line. I'm just going to draw what I see here. And now I'm going to draw his neck and chest in the same manner. I'm just going to sort of eyeball looking at the line drawing to kind of draw what I see. And I can always...
You could bring, pardon me, Mandy, could you bring in the finished artwork, at least part of it, into the, there you go. You want to just leave that out to the side so people have a perspective. Perfect.
Sure. Maybe I will, maybe this will work.
That would be fantastic. Yeah.
Okay.
That
all right.
Works for you.
So now what I can do is I can draw the roses. So on the line drawing, they sort of looked like scalloped circles, but we can really just draw circles. So I'm going to start with rose A. So I have them marked off with letters here, so rose A, and I'm going to draw that down lower right. And this is just going to be a loose circle because this is really just the outline or the guide for me as I draw or as I paint on the roses later. And then I'll draw B, which is above A, but slightly to the right. It extends out a little bit past his backside. And then rose C is directly below rose B, and it's lower right of A. It even overlaps A a little bit, which is fine. So I'm just drawing rough circles. And then D is upper right of C, and they border each other. And then E is the same. It's upper right of D, and it borders D. So I've just drawn like a little cascade of circles that will be the roses. And then each of these roses has its own leaf. So rose A's leaf is sort of bottom left. So I'm just going to draw a rose or leaf for rose A. The leaf for rose B is upper right. And you could really draw these leaves anywhere, but I'm just going to place them where I see them on the line drawing. And rose C is also sort of bottom right. And my directions are if, we're looking at the drawing itself. Rose D is top right. And rose E is sort of just the bottom middle. All right, so we're getting there. We are almost done with this line drawing. What we have left are these stems with the leaves on them and his little legs. So let's go ahead and draw the stems with the leaves. If you took my January snowflake class, you might remember that one of the details on our snowflakes were stems with leaves on them. This is the exact same type of stem and leaf as what we did on the snowflakes. So we're going to just draw a straight line. We'll start with stem 1, and stem 1 kind of falls in between rows B and D, and it curves just a little bit along the top. And so you can draw 3 pairs of leaves that mirror each other, or you can look at it as just drawing 3 hearts, where the left side of the heart is on the left side of the stem and the right side of the heart is on the right side of the stem. So 1, 2, 3, and then the very top of the stem has just a single leaf. And you can fit however many leaves you want on these stems, but if you want to copy the line drawing, that's what you would do. It would be 3.5 hearts or 7 leaves.
And once you put down a few more, could you just bring it closer to the camera, please?
Sure. I'm going to do stem 2 now. Stem 2, these are his tail feathers, but we're making them leaves instead of feathers. And this one is the longest one, so I'm going to kind of make it curvy, and I'm going to make sure the end of it kind of points down. And this has 10 leaves on it, or 5 hearts. So there's 1, 2, 3. I'm kind of turning my work as I go so I can kind of maintain the same angle. So they're not big leaves and they're all the same shape, but they're also not perfectly symmetrical or perfect looking. It's okay if they're kind of loose looking. And then we continue with stem 3 that kind of jutes out from rows E. And this has 3 hearts or 6 leaves. And you're just going to stack them right on top of each other. Stem 4 has the exact same number of leaves and hearts as stem 3. So 6 leaves or 3 hearts, whichever is easiest for you to sort of conceptualize and draw. 5 is a little bitty one. It just has 4 leaves or 2 hearts. And 6 is even smaller. This has 1.5 hearts or 3 leaves. 7 is right beneath rose D, but really close to rose E. So it's sort of in that space in between those 2 roses. I'm going to curve it down, and I'm going to place 4 leaves or 2 hearts on that stem. Rose 8 sort of angles towards, or stem 8 kind of angles towards stem 7, and I can fit 5 leaves on there, or 2.5 hearts, and then 2 to go. 9 and 10 are both beneath rose A. So I'm going to go ahead and draw the stems for both. And then I'm going to put 3 on number 9, and I'm going to try and fit 5 on stem 10. But again, you don't have to get the exact right number of leaves on them, just whatever you can fit on. And then for his legs, I'm going to point this out. Underneath rose C, there's this little shape here. There's a straight line down and then a line across that connects to rose C's leaf. So I'm going to draw that in. So just a little line down and then a line across to connect to the leaf for rose C. And then I'm going to draw his 2 little legs. So one leg is sort of on that little shape we just drew. And the top of the leg is a little bit wider than the leg itself. And then the other little leg kind of starts from the leaf. That's part of rose C. And I'm going to draw his skinny little legs. And then instead of drawing these sort of triangular shapes for his toes, I'm just going to draw straight lines today for his toes. I'm just going to draw 3 lines, 2 that sort of go diagonally to the left, and then the back leg, I'm just going to sort of draw straight across. You can see that. So it kind of looks like he's standing and he has some stability. Kind of will make sure he doesn't look like he's floating in the air, if you will. And then that's our outline. This might actually be a record. I thought my last class was a record for shortest amount of time, but this one might be. And it was also kind of a complicated line drawing. So I hope you were able to keep up with me. If not, you should have a second to sort of catch up and finish up as I talk to you about color mixing. So I'm going to set this aside for just a second.
And I just want to jump in because you're right.
Okay, so I pulled down my palette. I'm pulling down my water glass. I'm pulling down my paints. And I'm going to pull down my number 4 brush. We're going to mix our colors with our number 4 brush. And one of we're going to mix 10 colors, like I said at the beginning, but we're going to mix 5 colors at a time. So the first 5 colors we're going to mix are going to be what we use for the rooster's face, his comb, his waddle, his beak, and his eye. So it's just this part right here. And if you're using the Skechers Pocket Box set like I am, you may have noticed there's no black in this set. We have a couple greens, we have 3 yellows, we have a couple blues, but there's no black. So we can easily mix our own black. So sort of the traditional way to mix black is to mix the 3 primary colors together and just sort of keep mixing them until you get black. Sometimes, because yellow is such a light color, I'll use green instead, because a lot of my natural blacks I find need more blue in them. And since green is comprised of yellow and blue, I can sort of shortcut not having to use yellow, but I can get more blue with the green. So a lot of times I'll mix a blue, a red, and a green. And then because this set has a dark brown in it, I can darken it and get to black a little bit quicker by using a bit of brown. But we're not going to do that today. If you were in my class last month where we used the medium drying inks, I talked a little bit about what happens when we mix complementary colors together. So if we were to mix red and green together, yellow, orange, and blue, violet, violet and yellow, blue and orange, we would get a neutral color. Because we're dealing with man-made pigments, it's going to be different shades of a neutral color. Sometimes it might be a really middle value gray. Sometimes it might look more like mud. So I kind of played around to see what the different color combinations gave us. And I found that by mixing the intense blue or phthalo blue and the cadmium red pale hue, or what just looks like orange, by mixing these 2 colors together until they sort of cancel each other out and kind of neutralize each other, it gives us such a deep dark gray color that it looks black. So that's what we're going to mix together to make our black today, instead of playing around with our primary colors. So let's stick our number 4 brush in the water. And we're going to use it like a spoon. And if you've taken my other classes, you've seen me do this. And let's place a scoop of water into 1 well on our palette. So I just used my brush like a spoon, and I just placed a scoop of water into 1 well on my palette. And this will just give the colors we use to sort of give something to mix into. And I'm going to start with this intense blue, phthalo blue, which is top row, far right. And I'm going to do a pass with my brush into this color. And by pass, I just mean I'm going to run my brush across that color a handful of times. So I'm going to do that here for just a couple seconds or a handful of times. And I'm going to deposit that into the palette where I put that scoop of water. And phthalo blue is really intense. Look how bright that is. It's super intense. If we were just to add a little bit of the complementary color orange to this blue, it would just dull it and make it less intense, and maybe even make it look like a midnight blue. So go ahead and rinse your brush real quick, dab it on the paper towel. And now let's do a pass of the orange, and let's see what it gives us. All right, so you can see it's much darker now because we added the orange, but I may not have added enough to really cancel out the blue or to neutralize it. So if I were to scribble this on, it might be hard to see under the camera. It gave me like a deep, dark midnight blue. I want to keep adding orange until they really neutralize each other and I have what looks like a gray. So
as you jump in on the color, even though it looks orange, it's actually cad red pale hue. Just to clarify.
All right, and then so I added a little bit more of that color. It still looks a little too blue to me. So I'm gonna still yet add a little bit more orange. If yours happens to look on the orange side, then you're gonna need to add a bit more of the blue. And now this looks more brown, which means I added too much orange. So it's sort of a back and forth game until they really kind of neutralize each other and you get a true gray or black. All right, so I'm just going back and forth with these 2 colors. So it's a lot easier when you're just working with 2 colors versus trying to mix 3+ colors, if you will. But you just want to be careful not to put your blue into the orange or your orange into the blue, because then they will sort of muddy each other up when you go to paint with them later. All right, so I'm almost there. I'm just doing this little back and forth game. All right, I think I'm there. So I'm going to draw this color or paint this color on, and you can see how that just looks like a really deep, dark gray. So that's what we want. And that's sort of how we created a block. All right, so we're going to use this on different parts of the rooster, namely his eye and parts of his waddle and on the edging of his neck and his chest. And now we're going to mix 3 reds. We're going to mix a light value red or pink, just a true red, and then a dark red. So let's go ahead and place a scoop of water into 3 more wells on our palette. So I just placed 1 scoop of water into 3 different wells on my palette. And into the first one, we're going to do a pass of the Alizarin Crimson. The Alizarin Crimson is top row. It's the red that you see. And then I'm going to quickly switch my brush, dab it on a paper towel, and I'm going to do probably 2 passes of the Chinese white. That is the white in your set. And I'm going to add white until I have pink. And I want like a nice soft light pink. So for me, 2 passes was sufficient to give me the pink color that I want, just a light pink color. And that was just mixing the Alizarin Crimson and the Chinese white. And then to get just a middle value or just a true red, I'm only going to use the Alizarin Crimson for that. So I'm going to do 2 passes into the next well on my palette. And these color mixes should be about equal parts paint to water ratio, which is why we're mixing these colors and not just pulling them directly from the palette. I want them to be a nice paint to water ratio. All right, so I don't need to rinse my brush because for my dark red, I'm going to start with Alizarin Crimson as well. So into the 3rd well on my palette, I'm going to do 2 more passes of the Alizarin Crimson into it. And then I'm going to tell you how we're going to darken it. I need to add just a little bit more water to mine. All right, so like I talked about, when we mix complementary colors together in equal parts or until they neutralize each other, they give us a neutral gray, or sometimes it's more mud. But if we were to only add a little bit of green to red, it would de-intensify the red and darken it just a little. So we're going to apply that color theory to our dark red. I'm going to rinse my brush real quick, dab it on my paper towel, and I'm just going to do a pass of the Viridian Green. Viridian Green is bottom row far left. And I'm going to add that to my red, and you'll see how it darkens it and gives it sort of like a dark mulberry kind of color. So the light pink was Alizarin Crimson and white. The middle red or the true red was only Alizarin Crimson, and the dark red was Alizarin Crimson and Viridian Green. It's the green that I think sort of looks like an emerald green in the set, the far left bottom row. Okay, and now for the 5th color for right now, place 1 more scoop into your well, and we're going to make peach. And peach is what we're going to use for the beak. And so peach is going to be equal parts of the cadmium red pale hue, or what I'm calling orange, the lemon yellow, which is top row far left, and Chinese white. So I'm basically going to do 1 pass of each of these colors, of the orange, of the lemon yellow, of the white. So I'll start with the cad red pale hue. And then I'll do a pass of the lemon yellow. And that should give us like a yellow orange color. And then I'm going to do a pass of the white, and then I'll make adjustments from there if I feel like I need to. Okay, so mine looks maybe a little too much like orange sherbet. So I'm going to add 1 more pass of the lemon yellow just to make it more peach looking. All right, and I think I might add a little bit more white too. So you just want it to be sort of a light peach color. Yeah, that looks good. So I'll hold that up, just a kind of a light peach color. So that was with the lemon yellow, the cadmium red pale hue, and the Chinese white. And those are our 5 colors for right now. And we are ready to start painting on the rooster's face, his comb, his waddle, his eye. And I am going to start with his eye. That is going to be what everyone's eye is drawn to when they first look at your rooster, believe it or not. So I'm going to use the 0 round brush for the eye. It's the thinnest or the smallest brush that we're using. So it'll just help me kind of maintain control as I sketch on his eye. So I'm just going to swish it in the water real quick to wet those bristles. And I'm going to dab it on the paper towel. And we're going to use black for his eye. So I'm going to put some of that on my brush. And I always feel like this is a moment of truth. Like, am I going to do this without messing up? We're going to see here. So I'm going to basically outline that football shape. that we drew for his eye, the top and bottom of his eye for the football shape. And if you need to go over it a couple times, that's okay. But don't fill in the eye yet, just outline the eye with your 0 brush in the black. And then I want to make sure that some of the eye is left without any color. I'll show you on the finished. So you see how his eye, you can still see some white inside that eye. We want to make sure we do the same. So what I like to do is I like to take my black and I like to put a circle in the middle of his eye to serve as like his pupil. And then I'll draw a vertical line right through the middle of the eye, right through the middle of the pupil, top to bottom. And then I also like to draw a horizontal line starting at the middle of his eye and moving to the right corner of his eye. So that way there's sort of a line that goes south and a line that goes east, and it leaves some white in the eye without any paint. Sort of the catch light, or just the iris, if you will. Or not the iris, well, you know what I mean. All right, so now we have his eye done. And while this dries, we're going to paint on his comb. So I'm going to put my 0 down. I'm going to pick up my number 2 brush. I'm gonna swish the brush in the water for a second, dab it on a paper towel. And I've divided both his comb and really his waddle into thirds. So if we were to divide his comb into thirds, where we have the right third, the middle third, and the left third, and maybe I can even just kind of draw it for you on mine. So I divided it into thirds, and the same with the waddle. We divided that into thirds, where we have a left third, a middle third, and a right third. We're going to apply a different color to each of those thirds. So to the right third of his comb, we're going to use the pink. So pick up some of that pink with your number 2 brush and just paint on the right third of his comb using the pink. And then because we're only going to be using our reds right now, don't rinse your brush, just dab it on the paper towel. And then pick up some of that middle red where it's just the Alizarin Crimson, and paint the Alizarin Crimson onto the middle third of the comb. And where the Alizarin Crimson and the pink meet, just let them bleed into each other as they want. Don't try to manipulate it or force it. Just let them sort of merge into each other organically. Okay. And then same thing, just dab your brush on the paper towel and then pick up some of the dark red, and you'll paint that onto the left third of the comb. And same thing, let the dark red kind of bleed or move into the Alizarin Crimson as it wants without much interference from you. And then let's continue this color. Let's take it all the way down the left third of the waddle. So that means I'm going to apply it to that section that's in between the beak and that circle that surrounds his eye. I'll hold it up here in a second so you can see. Okay, so just take the dark red and carry it all the way down the left third of his waddle. And then dab your brush on the paper towel a few times. And then grab the middle red, and we'll apply that to the middle third of his waddle, but not to that circle that's on the waddle. So just sort of work around that circle, because we're going to apply black there. And we'll let the dark red and the middle red blend into each other. And then pink to the far right bottom of the waddle. Like so. And we're not going to apply anything yet to this little part here or to the circle surrounding his eyes. We will in a second. I just want to give this paint a second to sort of settle into the paper before we do that. But while this paint is still a little bit wet, rinse your brush real quick by swishing it in the water. Dab it on your paper towel just to remove excess water. And we're going to use black again. So we're going to take black with our number 2 brush. And so we have his comb here, the very right part of his comb. I'm going to start about halfway up on the far right edge of his comb, and I'm going to draw a thin black line along that edging. I'm going to move it along the top of that circle, above that football shape for his eye, along the left edge of that circle, down to that circle we drew on the waddle itself, and I'm going to fill that in with black. And then this will kind of soften into the other colors that are around it. I'll hold this up so you can see. And you can always add more black if it's really faint like mine. If you accidentally added too much and it's bleeding into the pinks, you can just take a clean brush that's dabbed on the paper towel and just sort of wipe up some of the excess. Usually, a lot of times, when this dries, I will repeat the whole process one more time just to make it darker, more saturated. We won't do that today just due to time, but usually I'll do that. Oh, and then also take black and do a really thin line of black along the bottom of his beak. A really thin line along the bottom of his beak. And then we'll swish our brush, dab it on the paper towel, and let's fill in the rest of his beak with that peach color. And my peach is really, it looks lighter on now that I have it on the paper, but that's okay. All right. And now we're ready to fill in this little curved shape and the circle that surrounds his eye. We're going to start that by using the light pink or the pink color. And so I'm going to carefully apply it along that curve. If it starts to bleed into that black circle we applied on the waddle, let it. It'll just sort of give us like a grayish pink, which is really pretty. It's not going to hurt anything. And then as you apply it above and below that football shape for his eye, just be really careful not to go over the eye itself so we can maintain that white spot inside of his eye. And then after you've applied pink to the whole thing, if you want, sometimes I just like to take the tip of my brush, I'll stick it in the red, and I'll just dab it maybe along the lower left of that circle around his eye just to give it a bit more color. And I might even do the same thing to that kind of curve that's next to that circle on his waddle. Okay, so that's his face. And like I said, when this dries, you can always repeat everything we've done up to this point to just give it a little bit more color, a little bit more saturation, but just due to time, we won't do that today. All right, so we're gonna let this dry. We're gonna set it aside and we're gonna mix our final 5 colors. And we're gonna use these colors on this part of the rooster. What I'm calling the top of his head, his backside, his neck, and his chest. So pull back your Skechers pocket box set, place a scoop of water into the next well on your palette. And we are only going to add yellow ochre to this new well. Yellow ochre is the yellow that's on the bottom row of your Skechers pocket box set. It's sort of like the brownish yellow. And I'm just going, oh, you know what? I want to use my number 4 brush again for this. I really like mixing colors with my number 4 brush because it's just a little bit bigger. And I'm going to do 2 to 3 passes of the yellow ochre into that water. Probably just 2 passes would be enough to make sure it's not too thick. Okay, so just the yellow ochre. And then do another drop of water into the next well of your palette. And this one will only be burnt sienna, which is directly to the right of the yellow ochre. It's like the reddish brown or the orangey brown shade. And that should only need 2 passes as well to give us the right sort of paint to water ratio. Swish your brush real quick. Do another drop of water into the next well of your palette. And this one will receive only the burnt umber, which is the really dark brown that's in your set. Okay, so we had yellow ochre, burnt sienna, burnt umber. Each of these wells only get that one color. But now we will mix a special color that we can't pull directly from the set. So let's do a scoop of water into the next well on our palette. and we're going to mix a reddish brown. So the reddish brown is going to receive 1 pass of the Alizarin Crimson, 1 pass of the burnt sienna, and 1 pass of the burnt umber. So 1 pass of these 3 colors, the red that's in the top row and the 2 browns in the bottom row, just a single pass of each. And it will give us such a pretty reddish brown that we're going to use on our rooster. All right. Oh, I just love that color. I don't know why. Usually you don't think of brown as being a color that you like, but I really like this color. All right. And then one more color. Okay. This color is the green that we're going to use on the leaves that are attached to the roses. So not the stems, but the leaves that are with the roses. And we could have just used Viridian green, or we could have just used the sap green, but I kind of like the green that is created when we mix these 2 greens together in equal parts. So just do a pass of each color of each of those greens, of the Viridian green and of the sap green. And it just gives us sort of like a neutral middle green that sort of falls in between the Viridian green and the sap green. And mine's just a little bit light, so I'm just going to do a half pass of each color just to make sure it's the right opacity. So they should be about 50% opacity, equal paint to water ratio. All right, and that's our palette. Isn't that such a pretty palette? I think it's so pretty. All right, so we're gonna put our number 4 brush aside again, and we're gonna pull back down our number 2, and we're gonna set our, oh, and one more thing I want you to do with your number 2 brush, actually with your number 4 brush, Sorry, no take backs. Okay, number 4 brush. What I want us to do now is I want us to put a scoop of water into every single color that's in the top row. Because in a second here, we are going to pull thick amounts of color directly from the Sketchers Pocket Box set itself. This does not damage your set. It does not damage your watercolors. They're meant to be used in this way. They already have water on them, right? From when we've been mixing the colors. But what this drop of water will do is it will sort of soften the top layer of the cake or pan. So it'll be easier for us to pull a thick amount of paint from them in just a minute. So every single color in the top row, and then in the bottom row, just place a drop in the Viridian green, which is the far left green. And then you really can place this aside. All right, and then you really can place your number 4 aside for now, and we're going to paint on the rooster's head and backside and neck and chest using the number 2 pencil. Okay, so just like we did with the comb and the waddle, I'm dividing this section into thirds as well. So we'll have the upper third, the middle third, and the lower third. We're going to start with the middle third. And we are going to apply the burnt sienna color, which is that kind of bright orange brown. And I'm going to use what's called a vertical hatching stroke. So a vertical hatching stroke is where you're going to take your brush and you're going to do just a small stroke down, just a vertical stroke. And you'll just keep doing these vertical strokes like this, what you see right here. Except I'm going to place them so they're a little bit closer to each other. So I can still see some of the tooth of the paper beneath my strokes, but it's not super far apart like that. But it's also not so close together that I'm totally filling in the tooth of the paper. So we want this where they're somewhat close, but they're not totally far apart or not overlapping each other completely. All right, and then another thing I want to say is we're only going to add this color to our brush 1 time, and then I'm going to show you what we're going to do. So load up your brush with this color. You can wipe it on the edge of the palette if you need to once or twice to remove excess. And I'm going to start in the middle, right there at that curve, and I'm going to start doing these hatching strokes, working my way down to the top of the roses here. And then as soon as I start to paint on with sort of a dry brush technique, and I kind of need to add more paint to my brush, what I'm going to do instead of adding paint from my palette is I'm going to take my brush, dip it in the water for just a second, wipe the excess on the rim, and then I'm going to keep painting on with a now more diluted version of the burnt sienna. And I'm going to do that every single time when I need to add more to my brush. I'm going to add water to my brush versus color, if that makes sense. And then I'm also going to carry this color to some of the sections that sort of fall in between the roses and the leaves, just to give these little areas a touch of color too. Totally not necessary, but I just like to give those just a little bit of color too, so it's not the bright white of the paper. And then this is just a good introduction to how we're going to apply both the roses and the stems with the leaves, all right? And then the top third of the rooster will receive the yellow ochre color in the exact same manner. So I'm going to clean my brush, dab it on my paper towel. I'm going to load up a lot of that yellow ochre color. All right, and I'm going to apply the yellow ochre color to the top third of the rooster, and then I might just do a few strokes of it onto those sort of negative space sections in between the roses and the leaves as well. So I'm going to start at the top near his eye. I'm going to do that vertical hatching stroke. It's okay if you overlap this color a little bit with the burnt sienna we just applied. And then as soon as you kind of run out of color on your brush, just stick your brush in the water for a second and keep on going. And this will kind of help us get that loose look. So they're quick movements. And it ensures we don't totally fill in the tooth of the paper. And then the bottom third will receive the reddish brown color. That reddish brown color that I'm apparently obsessed with. So I'm going to load that up. All right, and then I'm going to start painting on the lower third of the rooster using the reddish brown color in the exact same way that I applied the burnt sienna and the yellow ochre. As soon as I run out of paint, I'm just going to add some water to my brush, and I might just add a little bit of that color to those negative spaces as well.
Could you bring that up close again? That's perfect. Yeah, they want to see the technique.
And this might take some practice getting the vertical hatching stroke. That's totally normal and it's fine. The roses too might take a little bit of practice when we get to those in just a second. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to get our first introduction to pulling color directly from the palette itself. And I'm going to use the cadmium yellow. And so I'm just going to take my number 2 brush and I'm going to just gently run it into that thick amount of paint that should be sitting at the top of that color. And then I'm going to brush on a few strokes using this color to the upper third. And this will just sort of give the rooster a nice bright pop of color over that yellow ochre. So I just applied it loosely over the top third over the yellow ochre. And that's the cadmium yellow. And I pulled it directly from the caker pan. And then I'm going to rinse my brush, dab it on my paper towel. And now we're going to divide his little neck into quarters. So we've been talking with thirds, but now we're going to do a quarter. And so if we were to divide his neck in half right down the middle, figuratively, not literally, and then divide that in half again, just to the bottom quarter, we're going to apply the burnt umber, which is the darkest brown. So it's not going to be quite to the whole part where we applied the reddish brown, and you probably won't need to wet your brush here. You'll have just enough to apply to that whole bottom quarter section, the dark umber. And then just along the bottom edging, we're going to apply black. Just along the bottom edging. And then I also like to add a little bit of black right along the top of his head, just to darken that up just a bit. So I'll hold that up. So I applied it just along the bottom edging of the rooster, black, and right along the top, just a couple strokes, just to darken that spot up. And then from here, it's really up to you if you want to make any more adjustments. I generally like to do another layer of the burnt sienna and the reddish brown just to sort of brighten up my rooster. So I might apply a bit more of the burnt sienna down the middle and maybe a bit more of that reddish brown color I really like along the bottom third. So I like to work in layers here. Just to kind of brighten up the rooster a bit more. So that was the burnt sienna, the reddish brown we made, but that's totally optional. But you can still see some of the tooth of the paper, right? So it creates nice movement and some interest and some negative space, which is what I really like when I work with watercolors, is creating some negative space where I can. All right, so we're chugging along here. We're gonna talk about the roses now. We're gonna use our number 4 brushes for the roses. I'm going to demo for you a quick rose, and then we'll draw them or paint them together. So I just drew a circle right up here. Maybe I'll draw a darker circle so you can really see where I'm working. So this is how we're gonna do the roses. We're gonna pull directly from the Skechers Pocket Box set. I'm gonna take my number 4 brush. I'm going to run it into the Alizarin Crimson. How I draw my roses is I like to place a really thick dot in the middle, and then I'm going to draw an arch above it and an arch below it. And you can overlap if you want, like even if the arch connects to that center dot, it's fine. And then it's just like if you were cake decorating and icing a rose, you're just gonna work your way around with these scallop shapes. And then as soon as you start to feel like you're dry brushing, you're gonna dip your brush in the water, wipe it along the edge, and then you're gonna keep going with a now diluted version of that Alizarin Crimson. You're gonna work your way all the way around. I really like to use the side of my brush too, to get a really nice thick scallop. And I'm just going to continue doing that all the way around until I fill in the outline. Okay, and you'll see that it gets softer and lighter as we go out, because we kind of create a gradient by starting off really thick and then getting lighter as we go. And then what I'll do is I'll stick just the tip of my brush into the green and I'll paint on the leaf. And I don't even rinse my brush, because we know that adding a little bit of red to green will just darken the green and give us like a different shade of green than what we mixed in the palette. Okay, so this is how we're going to do the roses. So let's rinse our brush real quick. This top one is red, so we're going to stick our number 4 into the Alizarin Crimson on our palette. Dot in the middle. We're going to do an arch above, an arch below, and then we're going to just go all the way around with scallops. If you are not able to keep up with me on these roses, the roses all literally have the exact same technique. So just do what you can with me in this hour today, and then you can always finish them up after this class is over. Because I don't want to go over it all, but if I go over, I don't want to go over too much. So I'm going to kind of chug along here as we paint on these roses. And then after you do your scallops all the way around, stick just the very tip of your brush into the green, and you can paint on its leaf. And I'm going to let the red bleed into the green as it wishes, where the leaf meets the rose. I think that gives like a nice loose look. And then this rose down here is also red, so I'm going to do the same thing again. Dot in the middle, arch above, arch below. As soon as I can't paint on any more scallops, I'm going to stick my brush in the water for a second. I always wipe it along the edge of the glass though, so that I'm not dropping a ton of water onto my paper. I do want to release any excess water, and then I'm just going to keep going. And you know, this might take some practice for you to get a hang of the roses. I know it did for me, but you'll get there, I promise. And then this rose is orange. So we're using the cadmium pale red hue, which is the color that looks like orange in the top row, but it's the exact same process. A dot in the middle, an arch or scallop above, an arch or scallop below, and then just working your way around the rose, making scallops. And I should say the scallops get a little bit bigger as you work your way around the rose. They don't all stay tiny. They just get a little bit bigger as you go around and around. And I'm not afraid to mix my orange into the red. And then same with the orange. I'm not going to rinse my brush before I dip the tip of my brush in the green and paint on the leaf. The orange will just give the green maybe a slightly darker brown green color. And then the rose right next to the orange one we drew is another red one. So I'm going to pick up the Alizarin Crimson again. Same process. So you can just keep watching me and trying to follow along. When this class is over, I would love to see your finished paintings. It makes my day. You can find me on Instagram at Mandy Peltier Artist or on Facebook at Mandy Peltier Artist. You can also go to my website, mandypeltier.com. I have that information all right here. And then there's also a few hashtags that Michaels and Winsor and Newton would love you to use. And it's Make It with Michaels, Michaels classes. I think there's one Make Art with Michaels, and then Winsor and Newton. And we'll be checking those hashtags and looking for your art there. And then this last rose here is orange. So it's another cadmium red pale hue. And we'll just keep doing the same process. This piece gives you a lot of work with roses. All right.
You're making really good progress, Mandy. The roses are coming out lovely.
Thank you. They are really fun to paint.
Yeah, great tip on that one.
All right, and then last rose here. So I'm sorry if I'm moving a little fast for you, but again, all these roses take the same thing. So even if you're not able to finish them with me live, it's the same process for all of them after the class is over. And then let's go ahead and talk about the stems. The cool thing about the stems is they all receive the same technique or process. They just each have their own color, but all of the stems with leaves, the color comes directly from that color's cake or pan in the set. So it's the same process as with the roses, where we're gonna do like a gradual gradient technique. So this first stem here, I had it labeled as stem 1 on the outline, is the Viridian green. So I'm gonna pick up a thick amount of the Viridian green with my 4, or you can use a 2 for this as well. I'll use a 4 since I already have it in my hand. And I'm gonna use that thick amount of Viridian green to paint on the bottom of the stem and to paint on the first 2 leaves. Now my rose is still a little bit wet here, so my green is bleeding a little bit, but that's okay. So, and I don't even necessarily try to fully fill in each leaf. If you look at my good finish, took my time one, you can see a little bit of white through each leaf. I do that intentionally just for that negative space. But after I fill in the bottom part of the stem and the first 2 leaves, I'll stick my brush in the water for a second, wipe it along the edge. I'll paint on the next part of the stem, the next 2 leaves real loosely. Then I'll stick my brush in the water for a second, wipe it along the edge, paint on the next part of the stem and the next 2 leaves. And you'll notice it gives us a gradient doing that. So the top part of the leaf will be a lot lighter than the bottom part of the leaf. And that's just by gradually diluting the paint that's on our brush. Okay. And we're going to do that for every single stem. So if you didn't catch it with this one, I'll repeat it for this next one. This next stem, this blue one, uses that intense or phthalo blue. So I'm going to pick up a thick amount, and this is why we dropped that drop of water into these caker pans. So it gave us a thick amount of paint to pull from. And I'm going to paint on the dark, intense phthalo blue to the bottom part of the stem and the first 2 leaves. I try to use a different part of my rim as I wipe off the colors so they don't blend together and create a new color. And then I'll dip my brush in the water for a second, wipe it along the edge, paint on the next part of the stem, the next 2 leaves, brush in water, wipe it along the edge. And you'll see it's gradually getting lighter as we go. So this is just sort of a quick way to get a gradient, even if you're not trying to do a gradient background, because you don't only have to do gradients to backgrounds. You can also do it to objects like the stem and the leaves, which I think is really fun and special. All right. And I turn my work as I go. Sorry about that. And then this next stem is another Viridian green. There's a lot of Viridian green in this piece. So I'm gonna, same as this first stem we did, it's the Viridian green. This is a smaller stem, so it won't take as long to paint on. So I'm just going to paint on the bottom part of the stem, the first 2 leaves, brush in water, wipe it along the rim, and repeat. And I should let you guys know, so March is sort of a bird theme for me. In 2 weeks, I'm teaching another class, and I'm teaching this Eastern bluebird. He's sort of a loose style Eastern bluebird. He uses some of the same techniques as our rooster. All right, next stem is this cadmium pale red hue. So I hope you'll join me for that class as well. We've actually have an eastern bluebird nest real close to our house. So I get to enjoy eastern bluebirds every day right now. And I like to think it's just because he knows I'm going to be teaching a class on him. So he just likes to come and say hi. But I'll tell you what, it's giving our indoor cat some really good entertainment lately, seeing a bluebird all the time right outside our window. Okay, after the cadmium red pale hue is alizarin crimson. Alizarin crimson is the red that's in the top row. But these are all receiving the same exact technique. And I'm moving fast here, so this isn't my neatest or best work, but that's okay. And then underneath the alizarin crimson is another viridian green. And again, I'm using the 4, but you could always use a 2 for this if you wanted, if that was easier for you. And then we're ready for what's underneath the rooster. We're almost done here. This here is ultramarine blue. Like I said, we're using every color in the set today. Ultramarine blue is the other blue that's in your set. It's top row, second from the right. It's right next to the intense or phthalo blue.
And I'm just going to jump in for a quick minute. You're doing really great. Thank you, everyone, for participating. We're getting near the end. I know we kept a pretty quick pace, but please refer to michaels.com/classes, which has been in the chat. But wherever you book this class is where you'll find the recorded classes in 48 hours. You'll also receive an email with a survey that we would love to hear from you about what you thought about the class and Mandy and the content. So that will always help us curate more interesting projects for you. On the Michaels website, you can see Mandy's next class is booked. I put that in the chat as well. It's for the Bluebird. That is on March 23rd, at the same time. And we have many other classes that are scheduled. So please join us. And thank you all for participating. And Mandy will just close us out.
Sounds good. Thank you, Jeannie. All right, so I went ahead and painted this one on because I figured you at home could tell that this was the cadmium red, pale hue, or orange. So moving back to this one's lemon yellow. This is the light yellow that's in your set, top row, far left. And I will say with this lemon yellow, I just go ahead and paint on the whole stem using the thick amount of lemon yellow. And the reason why is because it's such a light color. I feel like if we diluted it as we went, you wouldn't even be able to see it when you were done. So I do just go ahead and paint on the whole thing using the dark amount of lemon yellow. And then this last stem here, you could do it as the ultramarine blue, but I'm going to do it as the intense phthalo blue. Intense blue, phthalo blue. On the set, it's intense blue, and then in parentheses, it's phthalo blue. And I don't know about you, phthalo is hard to pronounce. I think I can only pronounce it because I used to live in Poland, and they pronounce like 7 letters as one syllable. So
it is a bit tricky. It is a bit tricky. So there's a lot of consonants in the end. It's like a lot of times referred to as phthalo as well.
It was gracious of Winsor Newton to just call it intense blue. All right, so the last thing we have is his little legs. I'm going to use my number 2 brush for this. All right, his number 2 brush. And this little shape that we drew where it was the line down and the line across, we're going to use black for that. And I have to mix just a touch more black here. I did not mix enough at the beginning. All right, so give me a second here. All right, so I just mixed some more black, mixing that phthalo blue and the cadmium red pale hue. And then we're gonna fill in that top part using our black. So I just filled it in with the black here. I'm gonna rinse my brush real quick, dab it on my paper towel. You can see how well used this is. And we're gonna revisit that peach color. And we're gonna take the peach color and I'm going to apply it. Sorry, I still have some phthalo blue in my brush here. We're going to take the peach color and I'm going to use those vertical hatching strokes just like we did here. So I'm not going to totally cover his legs. I'm just going to apply some of those vertical hatching strokes down his legs and then just a straight line across on each of his toes. I'll hold that up so you can see. Okay, and then I'm going to just dab my brush on the paper towel and I'm going to pick up some of that reddish brown. And I'm just gonna do a few more strokes with the reddish brown on his little leggies. Do any of you here have backyard chickens? And I'm also gonna do a single stroke on each of his toes again. It's something I've always wanted and I hope to get one day, are some backyard chickens. And then the very last thing is I'm gonna just take a little bit more of the black. I like to put a little bit of black at the top of his legs, down the right edge of each leg, and then just a single thin line on each of his toes, just to sort of finish it off. 77 chickens, I see that in the chat. That is incredible. If you live in Georgia, let me know where you live. I'll come get some eggs from you since that's where I am. All right, so this is the rooster. We're done. This is it. I am amazed and thankful and a little bit surprised that we are right at the hour. So as I told you, this was an ambitious project, but we did move pretty fast. So thank you for your patience with that. And it's really great to spend this hour with you. I hope you have a great rest of your day. And I hope I see you in 2 weeks for my Eastern Bluebird class.